Oh, thanks to Catherine there. Welcome to Radio Maria Ireland, and good to have your company today. Nice to be back at the microphone. Father Eamonn with you here for our morning Chatechesis on this Tuesday morning, the 9th of March, and lovely to have your company as well. And it's streaming now on Facebook and on YouTube too. And whatever way William has set this up for us, it's nice and bright. Looks like the sun is shining in out of Radio Maria on the world. Very impressed. It's good lighting attached, because for some reason previously it was quite dark or something. Anyway, nice to be with you, and lovely to have the beautiful mild weather of the last week, certainly, and a real sign of spring in the air. I know it's not the same in parts of mainland Europe, which is still, comes out of the winter in this month and even next month as well. The thaw not quite beginning to set in some parts. That's tough. I remember visiting Radio Horeb, Radio Maria in Germany some years ago, and it was in May, and they had daffodils coming up and snowdrops and things, and I was looking around thinking, May, have I got a second, or daffodils have long since withered away and gone? And it's because they're so high up and in the very cold climate. Spring doesn't come really until almost May. It's sort of a strange thing to go over there and just be experiencing the spring again. We've just done that. We're heading into summer here. So thank God for the beautiful dry weather spell we've had. No doubt there'll be a few storms on the way. That's normal in the month of March. But it's lovely to see all the daffodils up in the centre reservations there, and the ditches the side of the roads as we're driving along. Just a great sign of hope and of life and of growth. And that's something I love really, and it's really one of my favourite times. I hope it's yours too, really, in Ireland. May is probably my most favourite month, I suppose. So many country parishes I've ministered in. What always struck me driving around the country roads in Maytown, the windows open in the car, lovely warmth coming in, and just the bright green of Ireland. What a beautiful country we live in, of the growth bursting almost out at you from the hedgerows and the ditches on the country roads, and the trees overhanging with bright green growth again. It's just, and to drink all of that in, I sort of drink it in quantities to keep me going through the winter. It's beautiful to see. You really see the beauty of creation there just bursting out at us. It's gorgeous. And it wouldn't matter if it's nettles or dandelions or whatever wildflowers are coming out, but it's just marvellous to behold. And so the beginning of it we see this time of year, it can give us great hope and great light, especially in the midst of all that's going on. We're nearly a year now into this whole pandemic thing, and we see the restrictions and the ongoing situation. I do think the numbers are improving a little bit, and that, please God, we will in time, get back to a better sense of normality. What's been a most impressive few days, and thank God he came and returned safely, Pope Francis' visit to Iraq. And I do hope you've been following some of that, and I'd recommend going back over some of the videos that are online. Shalom World TV, Vatican News, of course, has it up on TV as well. Salt and Light TV, all these great new Catholic television channels, and the radio channels as well. It's all over the place. But have a look at some of those online sources, and what an extraordinary historical, just stupendous moment in world history and on the world stage in the times we're living in. The Middle East, just fractious, divided peoples in all the different countries, Iran and Iraq at each other. Again, the conflict even within Islam, the Sunnis and the Shiites. It's not a monolithic religion by any means. There's plenty of tensions, and no doubt fueled by politics and fueled by land, and more in our own country. We've had plenty of that in our own history. So why should it be any different elsewhere? But these lands, Iraq particularly, steeped deep in our faith roots. Ur, the land of the Chaldees, there Abraham was called from there. Go forth from your kin and your country. And if you've ever seen, the landscape in some of these places, desert. It really is. How they eke out an existence in some parts. Oh, they can't. I was watching a little documentary on the journey from Egypt to Arabia, that the Jews would have taken, the Israelites, that we've been recounting in the book of Exodus the last number of weeks as part of our Lenten office of readings. And man, it was a taxi drive that this American biblical archaeologist was driving and showing the footage, and it's only taken in 2016, it's not that long ago, but the footage that he was driving down from Egypt, of course, from Cairo, out in the site of the famous pyramids as they set out on the journey, and then driving on through just pure wilderness, and the same route that the Israelites would have taken in order to cross the Red Sea, and just barren landscape and mountains rising up around them and narrow paths, and difficult territory to negotiate with a large crowd of people and flocks and herds and everything else. And then coming to the sea, and you can see across the Gulf there, you can see over to Arabia and the mountains on the other side. A bit like if you go to Gibraltar, maybe you've had that experience in the south of Spain on a clear day, across the Mediterranean, you can see the mountains of North Africa. And it's no short distance, to it, and a formidable, distance to have to. If you're a crowd of vulnerable people being chased by Pharaoh and his armies, then trying to cross this Gulf, the Arabian Gulf there, to Arabia, and then what are you traveling across to? But again, another barren wilderness, hot climate, and no wonder the people grumbled and complained, and yet God was with them through all this. And very interesting, they went out on the sea, out on the Gulf, with a camera just to see what was on the seabed, and discovering chariot wheels and bones of people who had died, and clearly going back, they're convinced that this is the site of the Red Sea crossing. Most extraordinary. So, Iraq, the Middle East, sort of steeped so deep in our culture, our faith, our identity, and just how poignant and how significant for Pope Francis to go and visit these places, to meet with the Ayatollah, who I was reading there, where the Ayatollah would normally sit. I mean, he's a man of great stature and status in the land, and would seek to welcome guests. They would be necessary decorum, as you would meeting any great leader. But he stood up and came to the entrance of the house or the palace or whatever to meet Pope Francis, which in Iraqi terms and in cultural terms, huge gesture of coming to meet the Holy Father. And you might say, well, it seems like a small thing, but no, and in the eyes of the people, what this means. And there's a lovely video on cath.net, is it K-A-T-H, it's one of these Catholic networks, of a jubilant, on a smartphone obviously type video, a jubilant Iraqi man celebrating the coming of the Pope, can't believe it, and he stops the car and he gets out, you see on the camera, he gets out, there's a local traffic policeman, and they're celebrating the arrival of the Pope and what it means. Most extraordinary. These are sorely tried and deeply persecuted Christians in Iraq. And so what great hope the Holy Father has brought to them, and a message of peace that he's brought to them, and an opportunity for reconciliation. And this was the theme. He said, look, I've come as a pilgrim of peace. So there was none of your Western world type incursions going on, There was no invasion. Remember that, the Gulf War. Gosh, just heavy armored troops, coming into, and so again the terrorists put down their weapons for the days. I think there was a truce declared for the number of days as well of the Pope's visit. And just the other thing that really struck me, it just kind of flies in the face of all we're seeing and all the restrictions and everything else, was that in the middle of the pandemic and the virus, and here's the Pope meeting and greeting. Okay, he has his mask on, there's distancing going on, but yet the people are lining the streets and they're all, next to each other and top of each other and all jubilant and all wanting to see and all widely enthusiastic. And moments when, they're all gathered for photographs without the masks on and so on. And so the Pope is challenging the world to the whole question of the pandemic, and obviously not making any statements other than his presence saying, look, life must go on. There are very important considerations here that we need to keep before us. apart altogether from the pandemic. By all means, observe the various rules and restrictions. But there are greater issues to be addressed and to be attended to that cannot be neglected, and the pandemic shouldn't get in the way of these things. Really, just a marvelous, extraordinary expression, really, on the part of the Pope. And there was one or two moments I saw him, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I think he's a tough enough character. I suppose when you're in your 80s, you can afford to be tough. There was just one or two moments I saw. He had a young priest assisting him. I presume he was a priest. If he needed help going up the steps or needed any assistance physically. But it was just interesting to watch the dynamic in the body language. He'd keep a very safe distance unless, beckoned by the Pope. And whatever moment there was, they were getting off the plane, and there was some Iraqi representative had met them. And there was a conversation going on behind the masks that they were wearing. And all I saw was the Pope kind of lifting the hand and wagging the finger, and like as if to say, no, this is how it's going to be done, or you don't tell me what I don't know what the conversation was. And there was another little moment on camera was caught very similar as well. Again, it just struck me that here's a Pope who knows what he's about and is a man of his own mind and sets to the issue at hand and walks the walk, doesn't just talk the talk. So most extraordinary visit and well worth reflecting on, and wait and see the fruit of that. I'm going to suck my tea if you don't mind. Shame to miss out, not a fine drop of tea there. So do look back over Vatican News and cath.net there. Ulrika sent me one or two interesting little elements there too. So the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity hails Pope Francis's just concluded apostolic journey to Iraq as a crucial moment for promoting tolerance, inclusiveness, and human fraternity. Don't know who the Higher Community of Human Fraternity are, but yeah, it'd be nice to think that nations could be involved in such a movement. That Pope Francis's historic apostolic journey to Iraq is an important moment for the world, a true promotion of the values advocated by the document on human fraternity. Well, I suppose Fratelli Tutti, that's the document the Pope issued recently. That has been referred to there. The committee noted that during his 4-day trip to the Middle Eastern nation, Pope Francis visited a number of Iraqi cities, including Baghdad, Najaf, Erbil, and Mosul. And the Pope also attended a meeting for interfaith dialogue in Ur, of course, where Abraham was called. I mean, just the historicity of that, it on my mind, kind of just rejoices and just jaw drops at these historic moments. And in a speech there, the Pope emphasized the importance of promoting human fraternity and called on believers to revive the values of human fraternity. So there was leading representatives of the Jewish faith, of Islam, and obviously the Pope together. It leaves you kind of speechless when you think it through. How is it possible to bring these communities together, so different, and yet sharing the same common root in Abraham? And these lands so steeped in it, really is marvelous. So the Pope, aiming to promote cultural dialogue and a culture of convergence and inclusiveness, so that everyone in our society can enjoy peace in his life, regardless of his race, culture, or religion. So don't be mistaken or misled or misunderstand. This isn't about what's called syncretism. If you ever come across that word, syncretism means a kind of merging of the best of all the different religions and making it, it's a common generic type belief. That's impossible and it's out of the question. Why? And here's a very simple doctrinal catechetical point. This is Chatechesis after all. It's very simple. That in the person of Jesus Christ, there's no parceling out Christ. There's no diluting Jesus Christ. There's no watering it down or just making it generic. You just cannot do that with Christ. With Jesus, it's all or nothing in a way. Yet with great respect to our Muslim brothers and sisters and our Jewish brothers and sisters, they share in elements of the truth of God-given truth of God's, again, God is almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing, and in different ways characterized by the different traditions of those world religions. Yet if Christ is God, then it doesn't do to somehow turn away from that towards Islam or Judaism. We, as we see in our brothers and sisters in Judaism, that Christ is the fulfillment of the Old Testament and all that the Jews long for in the coming of the Messiah. And Christ, as God's Son sent to us, brings God so much closer to us in his humanity as well as his divinity that Islam simply doesn't share. Has a completely different outlook. Islam will not embrace the idea that God is a father. That's anathema is the word, isn't it? It's sort of in complete contradiction to what the Muslims understand about God. God is certainly God of mercy, but a very all-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowing, and to be adored and almost unspeakable. God is so great. And that's good. We would share very much that. But in Christ coming into the world to reveal to us the Holy Trinity, it puts a completely different perspective on things. So my point is then that syncretism simply can't work, and it actually wouldn't serve anybody in the end. You get a mishmash of, I don't know, pious sayings and stuff, but Christ would lose his divinity if there was some kind of compromise sought. I don't know how you could even begin to even try that. So when the Pope meets with these, and we have this interreligious dialogue going on, there is no question that the Holy Father is trying to syncretize and just merge everything together. We can all be happy in the... That's not what he has in mind. Rather, I think he's trying to cultivate mutual understanding and mutual respect and living in peace to put away our differences that divide us and begin by sharing what we have in common and praying together, indeed as they did, the Pope sought to do, with respect, but coming to know our brothers and sisters. You know, that these two are men and women of deep faith and deep conviction. We differ, absolutely, but to respect their faith and where they believe. And who knows but that the Holy Spirit will prompt that dialogue on a path towards peace, certainly, towards reconciliation, yes, and towards truth. And that's on the mind and heart of any sincere believer, surely, is this quest and thirst for truth. You know. So if it is that we see division or conflict within Islam and certainly within Judaism, you know, it's not that, again, there's different layers and nuances and flavors and approaches. The hope would certainly be that in the Catholic faith, and we have to represent this, here's our task. We don't just sit back and watch the history unfold before us. We have a very active part to play in all of this. But that we see in this gesture and in this meeting that we have a part to step forward, to give expression to the unity that binds us together as believers in Jesus Christ. This monolithic, meaning kind of like a monument, a body of doctrine and of belief and of practice that is consistent, you know, that condemns violence, that supports the poor, that upholds the sanctity of human life in the womb. We would share a lot of this in common with some beautiful believers of Judaism and Islam too. We've tremendous ground for working together and building together. You know, so over the break I was reading a book, and have to recommend it. I said to Father John he must put it on his list of books for the book club, is the book by Magnus MacFarlane Barrow, telling the story of Mary's Meals. But this is, he's written several books, but this is the latest one. This is just called Give, and it's an excellent expose and exploration of the whole nature of charity. And he mentions in the book about the participation of people of other faiths with the work of Mary's Meals, that somehow they had transcended their differences in order to raise funds for poor children, to feed them a breakfast. And this was in Scotland, and it was apparently some initiatives, I think, of a Protestant lady, was it? I think, if I remember the story, and brought together other denominations, and then some Hindus and some Muslims living in Scotland came together as part of this fundraiser for Mary's Meals, and they raised £700 or something, and they brought their different cultures and practices to bear upon whatever gathering they had arranged, you know, and they brought food and so on. And he said, there it is, a lovely expression of communion in solidarity towards the poor. This is where Pope Francis is coming from with a lot of this. So again, just to be absolutely clear, there's no question of syncretism, of kind of a mishmash of belief. And Pope St. John Paul II was accused of that in his gatherings in Assisi, if you remember. He would bring together Hindus and Muslims and all kinds of other world religions in a gathering similar. And he took a bit of a criticism for somehow watering down Catholicism. And it's simply not the case. That's not what's going on there. It's a complete misunderstanding and misreading of it. Rather, we're all on the path to truth. We're all on the path of faith. None of us can stand up in any self-righteous way and say, well, look, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Only Christ is in the end. And the hope and the ambition is to just open up that dialogue and let it be said. And let we as followers of Jesus Christ, excuse me, would bear witness to that and allow that to bear fruit in the Holy Spirit's own good time. So wait and see what happens in Iraq. I'm just mesmerized and amazed by the whole transaction. In the middle of a pandemic, Pope Francis, look, I'm off to Iraq, lads, whatever else is happening. And because Pope John Paul II, unfortunately, wasn't, things were just too politically, sensitive at the time to go to Iraq. And here Pope Francis, look, I'm not putting off this journey. We promised we'd go, and we're going. And again, in the face of all these, and sitting there, was it in the cathedral in Mosul? And the images I saw was just the rubble around the Pope, and he's sitting there, and prayer going on, and just looking around him as if to say, the poor martyrs who were bombed to death here. I think the story is that the terrorists had come in and they locked the doors of the cathedral. People had taken refuge there, and some suicide bombers went in and just blew themselves up and killed everybody there. An awful, awful tragedy, and the deep wounds and the hurt, and oh gosh, we know well in our own country the experience of this and the hurt that's still there, and how hard it is to forgive. And so the Pope just entering into the very middle of all of this for us to show us. Most extraordinary, most extraordinary. What times we live in. We're here to witness this. So don't let these moments pass you by. Don't sort of say, oh yeah, it's just another item on the news. And you know what strikes me too is that because there's so little on the news nowadays, apart from COVID, it seems to be endless, that here is a fabulous good news story. It just flies in the face of all the other stuff that we're inclined to be bombarded with. To see the Pope is just, hey, and he's not doing it for himself. He's not in it for any self-glory here. He's a representative of Christ, and with his people, where it really hurts. What an extraordinary man! What an extraordinary moment. So don't let this pass by, and again, look it up. I'll share a little bit more with it on you. And as I say, Ulrika sent me some lovely stuff there too, to share with you. What an extraordinary time. Let's pause for a little piece of music. Again, I always love to hear from you. Maybe you were watching in, maybe you have some thoughts, maybe you know some people out in the Middle East who, because it's not just Iraq influenced by this, but you can include Iran and Lebanon and all these other Middle Eastern countries that looking to that Pope's visit. Man, what an extraordinary moment. Maybe you have friends out in Arabia. There's anyone who are working out in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and these places. So what must not be the influence there too? It really is Anyway, so I want to hear from you. 089 467 2000 is the text number as always, plus 353 if you're in the north or outside of Ireland. And drop us a text. Do give us a call on 014 123 456. Write to us at St. Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. And do on social media here, drop a comment, drop a like, drop a share, all these things, because that's all part of sharing this good news together. So we do love to hear from you. info@radiomaria.ie for an email as well. Now we'll play The Deer's Cry. I think we have a version of this lined up for you here. Catherine is looking at the mixing desk for me here. Let me see. We played our version of it earlier on, and it really went down a treat. So looking forward to hearing more of this. It just sort of struck me this morning, what a beautiful piece of music it is, and so fitting. The month of March, and of course St. Patrick's Day just around the corner, and The Deer's Cry celebrating for us to the breastplate of St. Patrick. So now, very good. We'll have a listen, and we'll be back very shortly. Thanks, Catherine.
It's by Afro Art, and the group is Voices 8. It's an a cappella group in London.
Perfect. Thank you. Your message for me? I missed something?
Just on WhatsApp. John getting
Oh, yeah. I like that's some critical issue arising here as chicken burrito.
No, thank God it's nothing. I thought you were on Facebook Live.
Yeah. Will you text it back there? Or? Yeah. Yeah, classical chicken is fine.
Is it the same one you get?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay,
And just say no onions.
no onions.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
very
you.
good.
God bless you. There you go, all that on Facebook Live. Ordering lunch. Can you believe it? That's funny. Life is funny. That was a lovely piece of music, an a cappella group from London. Come on the mic there again, Catherine, and just tell me who that is. Let's give them the credit they deserve, please.
Voices 8, and the composer was Avro
Avro Park.
They have some beautiful music.
Voces. Yeah, where is your Italiano or your Latin? Right. No worries. Very good. Thanks for that, Catherine. Lovely piece of music there. So now it's snowing apparently in Germany at the moment. God bless them. That's rough going. It's so much milder here, and thanks be to God. It's amazing the difference in temperature there. So our friends on Facebook Live got the benefit of me ordering lunch there. So you get bonus information here on if you're on Facebook Live. Anyway, very good. Lovely to have your company. Let me see. There was some very interesting messages that came in there. And just a shout out to everybody watching on Facebook Live. I see Bridget is there, Elizabeth as well. All our friends there tuning in. And if you're watching it later on, again, drop a comment, drop a like, drop a share, and let us know. A question here from Catherine. Father Eamonn, is it wrong to pray to Saint Joseph as well as to Our Lady, God and Jesus, when saying the Rosary, and to ask him to intercede with them for the intentions one says each decade for? That's from Catherine. And this very simple, straight answer is no, it is not wrong, because if you just consider the arrangement with the Holy Family, you know, we're studying a bit of this and praying it through on the consecration of St. Joseph every morning at 8 in the morning. We're up to day 23 now, I think, of the 33-day journey to the 19th of March. It's only 10 days away. And the solemnity of St. Joseph and consecration to him. But just, you know, reflecting for a little bit in the Holy Family, you know, Our Lady interceded with Jesus, do whatever he tells you at the wedding feast at Cana. And no doubt Joseph has a strong intercessory power, likewise with his divine foster son. Why not? And in another sense too, you see, in giving praise and glory to God, indeed, how is that not in some way echoing the very same as St. Joseph? So think of the apparition at Knock. You have the Holy Family is gathered there, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, and St. John the Evangelist. And it's as if it's one communion, you know. So there's no difficulty in uniting our prayers with that of St. Joseph, or petitioning St. Joseph likewise to intercede on behalf. He is patron of the Church, after all, too. So no difficulty there at all, Catherine. In fact, if anything, surely, as Our Lady would say to us, do whatever he tells you, St. Joseph would be the very same. I mean, simply a part of that. And what an extraordinary, when we're allowed to reflect on St. Joseph this year a lot more, and the consecration is certainly availing that opportunity to us, we can see the tremendous role of St. Joseph, and what an extraordinary, even though he says, and there isn't a word spoken by him in the sacred scriptures, and we have the 4 dreams of his, the 4 revelations at night time. Frank Duff is slow to describe them as dreams. It's interesting when I shared that article with you as part of the St. Joseph consecration days. Interesting, Frank Duff isn't that keen on because I suppose dreams suggest a sort of ambivalence, maybe. But I think that's the word that's used in the scriptures. Whereas in reality, they're obviously messages from God through an angel, which makes them a little bit different from just a dream. You know, you dream big, all these things, you know, live out your dreams. You know, dreams can be sort of cotton wool or cloud, you know, they're passing. They're obviously something more real, but obviously in his dreams, I suppose, in his sleep. Anyway, so it's just very interesting, his role, and so by all means he should be there with us as part of our rosary too. Why not? Silently, perhaps. You know, Pope Francis does, was I reading that or hearing that, that he has the statue of the sleeping St. Joseph. Have you ever seen that one? Where St. Joseph is lying down, he's asleep. And if he has any little prayer petitions, he'll write them on a piece of paper and put them under the statue. And you know, Joseph, you look after that. As it were, again, in his dreams, but, you know, communicating with God through that sleep time. Fascinating. It's the only statue of a saint I've ever seen sleeping, and I'm sure a lot of people could relate to that as a posture. What we used to call in the seminary a horizontal meditation. You know, just going for a horizontal meditation, which is, by the way, a few Z's. Everybody knew what it was. It wasn't exactly a code word or anything. And Catherine as well is suggesting that we dedicate a bit more time on St. Joseph for the year, and to explain it a bit more. Very great if you would include the old prayers to Saint Joseph in one of the programs. Now, you see, when you say old prayers there, Catherine, I have no idea what old prayers you mean. We have the lovely prayer actually that Vincent Smith sent us, and actually spoke it into WhatsApp. So a reminder to self there to dig out that old prayer to Saint Joseph. There might be other old favourites that I'm simply not aware of. So if you have old, quote unquote, prayers to Saint Joseph, send them in. If Catherine, if you're listening, please do, because indeed, I'd love to share them. I'd love to see them. We can put them online, certainly, for you as well. And she asked us, did Pope Francis compose the prayer to Saint Joseph, which begins, to thee, O blessed Joseph, we have recourse in our tribulations. We confidently invoke your patronage also. I'm actually not sure. I assume he did. Maybe that's an old prayer. Maybe he had that from Argentina. I have no idea. I'd have to look that one up. Perhaps somebody can help me to look that one up and let me know, and we'll pass that on to Catherine. Thanks for that, Catherine. Good on you. Excuse me. Mr. Frog is back again. Oh yes, can you mention the name of the video you spoke about Jews traveling to Arabia? Oh yeah, that was I just tripped across it. It's one of these videos that came up in my feed or something on YouTube. Was it that other one? Somebody had mentioned a channel to me, which was called, I think, Inspirational Philosophy, I think. Now, I don't think that, it may have been. Anyway, it was through biblical archaeology, and it was just a random video. You know, whatever I was looking at, this came out, I said, oh, this is interesting. And it was about the journey that the Israelites took to the Holy Land. So I'd suggest Google it. I honestly don't know the answer. Monica just texting in wondering where was that. And if you, a few keywords, you know, video journey of the Israelites to the Holy Land, or Egypt to the Dead Sea or the Red Sea. To be honest, I honestly don't know, but as somebody has suggested, that particular channel, I think it's the Inspirational Philosophy it was called, which looked to me more like a biblical archaeological YouTube channel than anything to do with philosophy. And maybe it was one of those videos, and I just dipped in and watched it for 10 or 15 minutes and just dipped back out again. But it was I have a kind of an interest in that whole area, but not academic or anything serious, but it's just fascinating, this affirmation that archaeology and history and geography lends to sacred scripture. The whole question of the flood is another fascinating study. The evidence for the flood, it's quite compelling, so it's good. Excuse me. Bernadette, has Saint Joseph ever spoken in his appearance at Fatima? I think no is the answer there. He appeared in the sky at the great miracle of the sun with, I think, was he holding the child Jesus with Our Lady at Fatima? But again, it was like knock. It was just an appearance. It wasn't, no word spoken. And to me, that's perfect. That's kind of, Saint Joseph has no business saying a word. Stay quiet. And I always have that image of him with Zechariah, who wasn't able to speak at all, at the visitation of Our Lady and to St. Elizabeth. And you bet your bottom dollar St. Joseph stayed well in the background when you were two expectant mothers who were expressing the joys of the visit of Christ. Who am I that I should be visited by the Mother of my Lord? And Our Lady's Magnificat. St. Joseph simply there to accompany Our Lady on that hazardous journey and to spend time with Elizabeth in her final trimester of her pregnancy with St. John the Baptist. So appropriate. And to me, it seems to me, it's not given to us in sacred scripture, but Zechariah and Joseph must have been around, not a word spoken. And so again, very fitting that the silent, strong type, isn't that what they talk about with men? The supportive provider, protector. Maybe there's something to be said for men. We're not given to much of the way of talk or loquaciousness generally. I happen to be stuck in front of a microphone now, so ordinarily it wouldn't be my first choice of places to be, but if it's a case of preaching the gospel, that's a whole other thing, to give the glory and bring the light to Christ, and to bring others to Christ, to God. So thanks indeed for those texts. And a listener too that was reading this morning that on the return flight from Iraq, Pope Francis announced that he may also consider a visit to Lebanon. Well, there's a country much in need of a visit, torn apart with not just political and geographical division, but the great tragedy of Beirut and the bomb there, and or the explosion there. Wow, it's just a land fraught with complicated problems and difficulties. And so if we think we have problems, listen, begin to notice these other places in the world and see that what we might think are problems, really, seriously, that we're so relatively well off. We have issues certainly and things that need to be addressed. Perhaps our greatest tragedy here is our want of faith, or our rejection of God, and to see that among certain quarters in our own country is lamentable in the light of St. Patrick and all that our nation has suffered in relation to faith. And just to see how it's really, we're under a certain form of persecution. It's much more difficult. It's so countercultural now to be a person of faith here in Ireland. It's quite the challenge. And yet we have freedom to practice our faith again. Let's not dwell too much on all the problems that are there. That call them challenges instead. Say, look, it's our turn. This is our generation. You think St. Patrick had it easy? He had it tough too. Now let me leave the conversation there for today. The time has flown past and we'll continue it tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to sharing a bit more of the Pope's visit to Iraq. I'll get a few things ready there and share a few more thoughts with you. And I do love to hear from you. So thanks to everybody for getting in touch. And thanks to everybody who's with us on social media as well. Great to have your company. And thanks to Catherine there at the mixing desk too. So we're going to pause now. Do stay with us here on the radio. We'll pray together our Angelus and our midday prayer. Thanks a million. Thanks, Brendan. Good. Thank you.